Have you ever wondered why things are the way they are? Asked yourself if things could possibly be better? The system can seem discouraging or lopsided, especially if your views are not the views of the majority. You have a duty to let your opinion be heard. This is your country. In the next few minutes, I will help you to see just how important your opinion really is. Your vote does count. We will look at how engaging the unengaged voter is important, party affiliation affects voter turnout, and politicians believe they are accountable. Many of you here today may feel that I'm talking about you. I am. I want you to know just how important your contribution is. First, we'll take a look at the unengaged voter. The person who just does not feel like they have a part in the political process. In the journal article, Engaging the Unengaged Voter, Vote Centers and Voter Turnout by Robert M. Stein and Greg Vonamy out of Rice University, what discourages voters is the cost. What is the cost of voting, you may ask? It is the lost personal time and resources used to vote. We all have busy lives, and time is valuable. The question then becomes, is voting worth my time? Will it ultimately benefit me? What will I get out of it? The article looks at the 2004 election in which 20% of non-voters said they just did not have the time or had conflicting schedules. 20% is a huge number. In the same article, Engaging the Unengaged Voter, Stein and Vonamy talk about the efforts that have been put into place to encourage voter turnout. Election day registration, early absentee voting, easier absentee voting, and in-person early voting are just a few of the things that have been put into place to try to encourage the non-engaged voter. Unfortunately, statistics show that none of these had significant effect on non-voters. This tends to suggest that non-voters need to have something just a bit more substantial to encourage them to get up and out to vote. I think it's as simple as choice. What I mean by that is you just have to choose to get up and get out to vote. All the prodding and provisions to make it easier to vote boil down to a simple choice. Your choice. Engaging the unengaged voter is important. I'd like to talk to you about my second point, party affiliation and voter turnout. How voter turnout affects the balance of power. In the article, Election Reform and Voter Turnout, Michael McGrath talks about how political parties try to move elections in their favor. They do this legally, of course. Republicans tend to favor laws that restrict early voting, require ID at the polls, and make registration processes more stringent. The Democrats call this voter suppression. The Democrats support just the opposite. This, the Republicans say, invites election and voter fraud. It is true when you look at the party, which party is pushing for no IDs at the polls. Which do you support? Are there non-Americans voting in your elections? The article Election Reform and Voter Turnout also looks at total election turnout. During the 2010 election, only 41% of Americans voted. Other countries have turnouts that push 80%. Also, it is proven that the young, poor, and less educated are less likely to vote compared to older, white, wealthy Americans. This can easily make an election swing one way or another. Politicians believe they are accountable. You cannot change things if you do not get involved. Now that we have looked at the voter turnout and balance of representation, I want to talk to you on how politicians view voters. In my third point, we will look at politicians and accountability. Which buck stops here? Accountability for policy positions and policy outcomes in Congress, as written by Philip Edward Jones. The author takes an in-depth look into how politicians view your vote. Our representatives do what their constituents want because they do not want to lose their job, not because they love the voter. I suppose that true patriotism was lost with our founding fathers, who were farmers and scholars. They only acted as politicians when needed, then went back to their practices. Only today have we created the lifelong politician. These politicians act with one thing in mind, keeping their job. Your vote is what they act upon, not what they perceive to be moral or righteous. In the same article, Which Buck Stops Here, the author talks about how members of Congress believe that if you take a position that is with what the people want, you will stay in office. One theory describes that politicians are either elected on positions they take, but rather the outcomes that their positions produce. People tend to look at what politicians have accomplished or resulted from their efforts. It is imperative that we take an interest in the direction our country is going. This is the only way to ensure balance and fairness. Politicians believe they are accountable. Politicians will not solve our problems. We must direct them to solve our problems. We all contribute to the big picture, each and every one of us. I leave you with one thought. This is your country, the United States of America. Exercise your right and duty. Stand up and be counted. You must get involved. We are counting on you. You must vote in the next election. Your vote does count. I hope you all have seen the importance of the role you must play in our coverage on how engaging the unengaged voter is important. Party affiliation affects voter turnout, and politicians believe they are accountable.